Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Good.
Uh, it's sort of the dog days of August, but it's not even August yet.
It's not August. Wait till you see August. If you think these are bad dog days of August, I bet it's hotter here than it is there.
I bet it is too. It's a beautiful day here. We've had some very hot ones, so people shouldn't think I'm reveling in my climate luxury here. But it's a fine day today.
Yeah. So, for my part, this week I have jury duty, not just in the sense of showing up for the jury selection process and doing your best to worm your way out of actually serving on a jury, but in the sense of showing up for that, answering questions forthrightly, and winding up on a jury. I've been listening to testimony for the last 4 days.
That sounds exciting. Is it a criminal case?
You know, it is exciting. It's a civil case, but I really wanted to deliver a short lecture here. Folks, do not
make sure you don't do anything that gets you disqualified from the jury.
I can't say anything about the case beyond the fact that it's a civil case.
Okay.
But I will say that the jury selection process made me worry that maybe more people are trying to get out of jury duty than in days of yore, although for a long time it's been a common thing to do. And I just want to say, you should do it. You should serve on a jury. It's both times I've done it. Last one was a criminal case. It's been really interesting and rewarding. I mean, this case isn't over, so
people say that. Almost everybody who does it says that. Some people who wind up like losing are annoyed, but
are embittered. Yeah, I said, this hasn't reached its conclusion yet, so the jurors may wind up hating each other. Who knows? But I don't think so. And people had told me that nowadays, I last did jury duty in the 90s, and they had said that smartphones have ruined the experience because in the jury room you don't really get to know people. Everybody's just looking at their smartphones. That is not the case here. I mean, people are looking at their smartphones, but we've definitely gotten to know each other.
I can't believe they don't make you leave your smartphones at the door.
That would be a lot. They don't even make you leave them at the door of the courtroom.
Okay, don't do anything that might get you in trouble.
No, I won't. But I do want to encourage people to serve on a jury. It really is a uniquely interesting experience, and do it.
Here in heavily populated Southern California, it was routine as of 20 years ago that high rollers would just throw the summons into the trash, knowing that nothing was going to happen to them. I have a feeling they may have tightened up a bit since then. It's certainly harder to get out of it once you're in the courtroom. You can't just say, hey, I'm a lawyer, even if, like me, you haven't practiced law ever, and get out of it. I mean, they're not going to let you out just for that.
Yeah, well, I'll talk about this more in the Parrot room, but anyway, on to the
as a result, you've kept close watch on the week's events.
Well, exactly. I don't
glued to your smartphone, looking at what's happening. Right?
You're exactly wrong, which means your point is well taken. I know a little about what's going on this week. Also, we're starting to tape late because of my jury duty today, so this will be a little shorter, both the public version and the Parrot room. But yes.
So you missed the exciting. The Ukraine counteroffensive is reaching a peak. They're going for the breakthrough toward the ocean that you're talking about. Ironically, the prestigious Institute for the Study of War, which has been hyping Ukraine's success, to the press for months and months and months, is now saying too many people are hyping Ukraine's success to the press and establishing unrealistic expectations. I thought that was funny. But so we've lowered expectations. They've taken a bit of. We have to have our ritual mention of Bakhmut. The main offensive seems to be in the south, where the theory is they've discovered some weaknesses in the Russian defenses. They're exploiting them. They still have a lot of forces in reserve, obviously not as many as the Russians, and they're bitching and moaning about how they didn't get our high-tech weapons in time. That seems to be the situation.
It does seem to be the. I mean, I'm a little fuzzy. I mean, what has, and I have kind of tried to keep abreast of this, notwithstanding jury duty. But so first of all, yes, there was, after weeks of the offensive being somewhere between simmer and low boil, they kind of amped it up, committed new forces to it that hadn't been involved, and made some gains. On the axis that I've talked about a lot, with that string of villages, they have taken a place called Staromorska, and according to weeks and weeks ago, when the offensive started, and they started in this direction, the Russians with attitude guys said the town to watch was one below that they haven't taken, called Staromilivka, and that if they get that far, which they haven't quite yet, then Russia would have to commit reserves, and that was what Ukraine wanted, and so on. And then they would be about down to the actual line of defense. Now, over to the west, the other of the two main axes in the south, in other words, leaving aside Bakhmut, which is strategically a little bit of a sideshow.
And that's in the north, right?
It's to the north of this, the front, the southern front.
Okay.
But on the western axis, I think they have reached finally the actual first line of serious defensive entrenchments. This is south of a town called Orakiv, and they are now right around this place called Robotine, which is where this first line of entrenchments apparently is. And I don't, to me, it still looks a little too blurry to say what's going on there. I've seen scenes of carnage, but I've also heard reports of success in actually, in some sense, breaking through the line, but I haven't seen that definitively reported.
If you read Institute for Study of War, they're all about Robotine.
Well, that is where they've actually reached, the defensive line of entrenchment.
But they're not claiming success. They're against
even they are not. That's funny, because I heard a BBC report this morning, and it's the only place I've heard that.
I read it last night.
Well, this morning I heard a BBC report saying there was a breakthrough of the actual defensive line there, and attributing that to the Institute for the Study of War. Let's not get into whether the BBC should be using the Institute for Study of War as a source, but they are.
Anyway, there was before that there was an article somewhere, I think the Wall Street Journal, saying that Ukraine's success puts Biden in a tough position. He was hoping that Ukraine would negotiate from strength. Well, fuck, why can't he say, Ukraine, you tried, now you have to negotiate from a position of weakness? I mean, that's the way the cookie crumbles. Nobody's going to take away Kyiv or the vast mass of Ukraine, but you're weaker than you were if you had had a big success. Why is that such a blow to Biden?
Yeah, you sent me that piece in the Wall Street Journal, and it was kind of annoying. I mean, first of all, it was, they chose to quote a guy at the Atlantic Council, which is sometimes referred to as NATO's think tank, asserting that, well, Biden, you can't negotiate now if this offensive doesn't work, because then you're negotiating from a position of weakness. And maybe in some sense it is politically more difficult to negotiate from a position of weakness. But you got to understand that's probably generally true, which means it's true on both sides. In other words, it's harder for Putin to sell a ceasefire if they've just suffered major defeats compared to if they have just done something impressive. So if you're gonna say, if you're just going to accept that nobody can negotiate from a position of weakness, then it's going to be a long, long, long time. And I guess this is the reason for the cliche that wars end when both sides are exhausted, because short of that, there's always one side that seems to be doing better and it's feeling its oats. I would point out that the last time this was really, really emphatically true of the Ukrainian side was in like November, December. They had these two successes. in Kherson and in Kharkiv. And what they said then, what we were in a position of strength. And one guy, Mark Milley, chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, who you'd think knows a thing or two about this, was saying now is the time to negotiate because the gains aren't going to be so easy from here on in. The intervening period has done nothing but vindicate him. And I wrote a Washington Post piece saying the same thing somewhat after he said it. But let me just say, like, so apparent, but but the blob said we couldn't negotiate then when we were in a position of strength because the recent successes showed we could do more. We had the wind at our backs, which I said was bullshit and turned out to be bullshit. And Russia has on balance, it was Russia that gained ground in the next 6 months. So
it seems you were right, Bob. I'm doing my Michael Barbaro. So Bob, you're saying you were right.
And then the person in the Barbell podcast says, exactly. Exactly. I was right. No, look, it's I'm not an expert, but I know that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is somebody you should probably listen to about military matters before, say, Anthony Blinken or Michael McFaul or Ann Applebaum. It was just kind of, and it was kind of, there was clear logic behind Milley's position.
I'm raised on the Cuban Missile Crisis, where if we listened to the generals, we would all be dead in a nuclear war. So
generals are not always the hawks. They are
I
often careful about advocating military.
I understand, but that was not the case in that situation, I believe. We should ask Fred Kaplan. He's the expert on the Cuban Missile Crisis.
So
there's an Edward Luttwak peace plan.
Yeah, I heard him lay that out on a podcast. So
all peace plans sound good to me. So this was like a ceasefire in place, and something else happens. We have various referendum in various places.
Yeah, what's your take on him? He used to. I just remember him as a name when a piece by him would come in the New Republic, it would be like, oh shit, another piece Marty wants us to publish. Another piece by a neocon.
I always thought he was interesting. He always, he speaks with tremendous authority, and he's. He always has an interesting wrinkle.
He is interesting, and I don't think he's just a garden
he may not
variety.
Always be right. He may not always be right, but he's not. I don't think he's a garden variety blob
neocon. I don't think he's a garden variety neocon. But anyway, yeah, he seems to think that I don't know, maybe, but he seems to think, if I've got it right, Putin would agree to withdraw from all of non-Crimean Ukraine except Donetsk and Luhansk, and there we would have an internationally supervised referendum, and everyone there would be among even displaced people who could show you that they are from Donetsk or Luhansk. I don't know. I'm not an expert.
That's what I
would buy that.
You've reminded me. That's what I thought was crazy about it. He had Putin retreating all the way back to where he was before the invasion, which seems unlikely.
And I don't even know how Putin could be so sure that he would win the referenda if it includes all the people who left Donetsk and Luhansk, which is disproportionately probably pro-Ukraine people, not to mention the fact that when he invaded, he converted some pro-Russia people into pro-Ukraine people. So I don't know. I'd like to think it could happen. I think the most that's realistic to hope for in anything like the near term is a ceasefire that would be more or less where the lines are, but it would stop the carnage, which is extreme. This guy, Dmitry Alperovich, who's totally pro-Ukraine, a couple of weeks ago, returned from there less than 2 weeks ago, I think, and talked about his impressions. He went on the same trip that Michael Kaufman and these other guys went on, and he just said, and again, he's totally gung-ho, pro-Ukraine, give them the weapons, and he always has been, but he's like, the Ukrainians are depressed, and it's depressing. You walk around Kyiv and see all these people without arms and legs. The train station has dozens and dozens of ambulances just waiting for people, and the people told him, oh, this is a good day. That's not many ambulances, and this is, I just don't, we'll see. Maybe this offensive will succeed. But remember, they had defined success as cutting off the land bridge, which would mean getting on this one axis where they seem finally to be to the defensive entrenchments, getting not just to Tokmak, which means breaking through a whole nother line of entrenchments, but then getting all the way down to Melitopol. They are a long, long way from that. And
but obviously we have to give them a chance to do that. And if they,
I think it was a mistake to give them a chance. I think Biden should have stepped in and ended the thing where it was. I mean, I said that before this offensive started, and I think we would have been in a stronger negotiating position, because at that point, for all Putin knew, this was going to be a smashing success. He didn't know what was going to happen with the offensive, and now we'll see. Maybe it'll pivot in the next week or two. But remember, they've got to break through more than one of these strong lines of defensive fortification to come anywhere near their goals.
The other big stories of the week are the Hunter Biden plea deal disintegrating, and the question mark, is the Ron DeSantis campaign disintegrating? I don't think so, but we can talk about that. There was a. So we can talk about either of the ones you want.
Both Trump and Hunter had bad days in court, right? Hunter's plea deal fell apart. I mean, let's talk about that, because I rely on you here. I mean, I was reminded of the Epstein. I mean, I gather the judge is suspicious that this plea agreement built in for him immunity from things unrelated to this.
Right. The best explanation, clearest explanation, was, I'm afraid, from Kimberly Strassel of the Wall Street Journal, somebody who I don't normally like, who points out the Justice Department wants to pretend there's an ongoing investigation, because as long as there's an ongoing investigation, they don't have to testify to Congress. And so the most obvious ongoing investigation is, did Hunter, in addition to not paying his taxes and lying on his gun form, not paying a huge amount of taxes on millions of dollars, did he fail to register as a foreign agent? And they have been going after some of his partners and forcing them to register, but that's not a big charge. I mean, the foreign agent registration, it's always brought up as like some horrible thing, but it's really a penny ante charge. But they were keeping that alive, and the key thing from Hunter's point of view is, he wants a get out of jail free card. He wants it to be over. And the big thing about that is, he does not then have to have any reason to cooperate with the Justice Department. They don't have any leverage over him at all. So if they ask him who was the big guy, he can say, fuck you. Okay. This is all about the big guy. There's nothing to do with the key point is, will Hunter have to say something that incriminates his father down the line, perhaps with a new administration or something? I don't know. So they had reached a deal where they snuck a get out of jail free card in the 15th paragraph of the gun charge, and it's ambiguously worded. And the idea seems to be that they didn't make it public. They didn't show it to the judge, which is unbelievable. They didn't show it to the judge until the last minute. She's like going into the courtroom and they say, oh, here's paragraph 15. Okay. The judge very smartly, I mean, the judge, a Trump appointee, seems to have been pretty much on the ball. She pointed out first that you're asking me to supervise whether he has complied with the terms of his probation on the gun charge. And that's not what a judge is supposed to do. That's the prosecutor's job. You're mingling the executive and, judicial branches. That's a no-no. But then she noticed this. She said, this immunity, this get out of jail free card, does this mean that he cannot be prosecuted in this ongoing investigation you say is going on? And that puts the Justice Department on the spot. They have to say, oh, no, it's not that kind of immunity. We can still investigate him in the future on those things. And the lawyer says, well, fuck that. Then we're ripping up the document. The whole point is we want to be immune from future prosecutions. So the thinking is that they left this ambiguous thing in there, hoping the judge wouldn't notice, hoping they'd slip it past the judge. And it would have provided total immunity because apparently there's a rule that ambiguous wording is interpreted against the government.
Mm-hmm.
So the government sort of knew it was going to lose down the road. It was giving immunity, and it was that makes it even more of a sweetheart deal. And they conspired to stop the judge from finding out. So the government looks awful. Hunter looks awful. The judge looks good. And they have to negotiate. And he's pled non-guilty, and obviously they're threatening to take him to trial, but they'll cut some other deal. But it prolongs the agony for Biden. It holds open the possibility that someplace down the line, Hunter may be asked to testify. You know, did you give any of your money to other Biden family members? You know, as he seemed to claim at some point, he's, you know, paying for expenses that otherwise would be Joe's. So that seems to be what happened.
So this increases the chances that that Burisma, for example, could come back to haunt Biden before the election next year.
Well, that always good if you believe the
I know, but it increases the chances. I'm asking. It always could, but the fact that the judge tore this up increases the chances.
It increases the chances that it just stays in the news for a while. It's inconceivable to me that they won't have a plea deal by the end of the year that takes it off the front pages.
Well, yeah, but
the Hunter prosecution. But I understand your question then.
Well, I thought maybe there was some chance that something would emerge from somewhere like the Burisma thing. You know, which seems to me to be not something we can totally dismiss.
Right.
And I thought there was still a chance that something could emerge from that would actually lead to a kind of legal action that this plea deal precluded. So that the tearing up the plea deal increases the chances of another actual indictment.
Well, if it was really a get out of jail free card, that's a very good point. It could be much more than the failing to register as a foreign agent. It could be actually some sort of corrupt bribery scheme that would be a big deal. And yes, it doesn't. He now at the moment is not protected against that. So yes, it increases the risk for Biden. I was thinking that of course, it never goes away because you have the head of Burisma allegedly having Biden on tape twice talking about bribery, okay, or implicitly bribery or things that are consistent with bribery. And so it could always explode at any minute. But yes, it could. Hunter would not be immune from that. It's just amazing the amount of money he spent on prostitutes and sex clubs, and then tried to deduct them as a business
Mickey,
expense.
not everyone considers that a waste, including
okay. It's like the
no value judgments.
He spent it on drugs and prostitutes, and the rest he just squandered. Yes. Exactly right.
Now, what is the meaning of that Freudian slip where you said Tucker instead of Hunter? Has Tucker been saying something about this, or what?
No,
what's going on the dark?
Their names just sound alike. Yeah, I believe that.
That's all it is. So it could have just as well. Yeah.
Anyway, Anyway, so it is what it is. It's a very bad day for Biden. On the Trump thing, I mean, he's indicted for some more shit. And he seems to have had a more elaborate cover-up than we realized. He wanted to delete some videos that showed him moving boxes. It's still a documents case. It still seems to me the big thing
isn't this more directly about like the actual destruction of evidence than anything prior? I mean, not that it matters politically. It's like, look, you're not going to touch his base. If anything, you're going to energize it. And nothing else matters. So, well,
I think it's more like you could obstruct justice to block a jaywalking ticket. That's not what this is. This is much more serious. But it's much more like the cover up is the crime. But what
was her name? Rosemary Woods. Nixon.
Right.
Her deleting the tapes, the Nixon tapes.
Right. There was this new bit of emerging conventional wisdom, which I don't quite believe, is that Biden would now rather run against DeSantis than Trump. It's hard to believe because there's a new poll out today showing DeSantis beating him and him beating Trump. So if that's true, if he really thinks he would rather run against DeSantis than Trump, it's a little late because he's been bringing these indictments that have boosted Trump as the nominee. So he made a colossal mistake, if that's true. I don't think it's true. It also, if that's true, it gives DeSantis the perfect chance to pull the old sandbag. And right now he looks crippled. He can't, he's in trouble. He's cutting back on his campaign staff. He's firing Nate Hochman for posting Nazi images. He can't control his super PAC, which has all the money, but it's technically independent. So he can't just walk into the office of his super PAC and say, you're fired and bring in new people. He has to send a memo to donors, sending a signal to the allegedly loyal super PAC people. It's time for you to quit your job and have somebody new come in. They may not get that message as efficiently as if he had the power to fire them. So, but anyway, he looks weak. And then so Biden engineers it so he's the nominee. And then he emerges as the strong candidate he actually is, the classic sandbag, and beats Biden. That's the scenario.
Of course, you're the only commentator in America who does think he's a strong candidate.
No, you look. There are others, but if you look at him in formal set situations, like the interview with Megyn Kelly he just did, or the interview with Jake Tapper, and see, hey, if this were a conventional candidate, he'd be really good. I mean, he's not a wit. He's not gonna charm your pants off, but running for president, not the Toastmaster General. So he does seem to have had what's coming out this week is there's some weirdness about his campaign strategy. Okay, I thought he was going to run as a guy who agrees with Trump on most issues, but he will get it done. Unlike Trump, he's to the right of Trump on a couple of issues like abortion, where Trump is liberal and squishy. He is anti-abortion, and maybe on sexual transgender things, he's to the right of Trump. But he seems to have had a strategy of getting to the right of Trump and having that be the central theme of his campaign. Why? Why does he have to do that? He has tremendous moderate appeal. He can do both things. The answer in politics is always you should do both.
Well, see, I have a theory that I hatched while listening to Bill Scher and Matt Lewis discuss this. By the way, Matt has a new book out called Filthy Rich Politicians. Sounds good. But they were, and by the way, Matt, of course, a conservative himself, though certainly not a Trumpist, who at one point had, I think, hopes for DeSantis, described him as something like humorless and mean with an annoying voice or something. I mean, it's just like they both completely dismissed him. But
he's gotten rid of the annoying voice in this one Megyn Kelly clip.
I would think that would take digital technology. I mean, you can't.
No, apparently you can. You can train yourself to speak lower.
So anyway, I developed this theory. They were talking about the weird. So this guy you mentioned who got fired, this campaign aide, for doing an online meme that turned out to have some kind of Nazi imagery that he denies having understood. But I gather there's been a certain amount of use on DeSantis' social media, at least up to this point, of kind of far right memes, or kind of what was the term they used? 6 years ago when these guys first, like Pepe the Frog. What's the term for the constituency that Pepe the Frog?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Now it's called base, but I forget what it's called.
Something else. Anyway, my theory was that maybe they were trying to take advantage of the fact that increasingly, different audiences are on different wavelengths. And so they send out Pepe the Frog. I don't know if they send out Pepe himself, but that kind of shit. But it's only going to get to the people who understand it, or at least they're the only people who are going to notice it. And it's mainly only going to get to them.
You can't get away with that these days.
Well, can't you? I mean, there's a guy.
No, he has. Look, every time he does it, it's immediately posted on the liberal media. See, DeSantis is a fascist. You can't do that. And I'm going to contradict what I said before, which is, usually you go for both groups, the moderates and the right wingers. But he seems to be focusing on also getting in. Apparently, this guy is Nate Hochman. Okay, he's a very bright guy. We'll hear from him again. He's smart. He has a lot of energy. He was a rising star at the National Review. I actually recommended him for a job now. My credibility is totally shot. And but he has a project which is to take the alienated far-right men who are becoming Nazis and woo them back to sanity. So if you can get them to endorse at least half establishment governor like DeSantis, that's moving him in the right direction. Okay. Mm-hmm. But why would DeSantis want to reach these crazy people? I mean, there are not that many of them. They're influencers. They have a large online following, but in terms of the voters, they're just not that big. Ignore them. Mm-hmm. Yet he seems to have had a strategy for reaching out to them. And I don't understand why. Steve Bannon has the same strategy. Okay. He's always keeping this group of people on his side and churned up. And there must be either they're both crazy, or there's some secret poll showing that these people are the key to victory that I haven't seen. But that's the part I mean about DeSantis' strategy being crazy. Why appeal to these people at all? Why have anybody doing memes, unless it was a personal project of Hochman, doing means to appeal to them and get them that their influencers tweeting for DeSantis? Who cares? That's not where you're going to win the election. You're going to win the election by getting most of the conservatives, some of the ex-Trumpers, and then in the general, getting a lot of the moderates. And these people are not going to be important. And that's what I think is coming out that DeSantis' campaign strategy was crazy from the start. That's what
that was Bill Scherer wrote a piece in April saying he just shouldn't run. And Bill has been saying that he had the wrong strategy all along. I forget what Bill's version of the right was. But,
they may be right. I mean, their podcast has a bigger audience than ours, I believe.
I don't think so, but
okay. Maybe it's in Matt's book.
Maybe it is. People should buy his book. I actually have a news quiz for you that I was going to lead with. And it takes us a little. So, I'm going to give you two countries. Name the big news story involving each. Okay. Nigeria.
Coup.
Ooh, you fell for it. The second country is Niger.
Oh, Niger. I'm sorry. Yes.
So you're 0 for 1. And in a way, you're 0 for 2. In a way, you're 0 for 2 because the Biden administration, as we tape, has not yet been willing to call this a coup. And this is an interesting fact. Do you know why they're not willing to call it
the Niger thing?
Yeah.
God, you just made a fool of me, Bob.
Thank you. I wish we had led with it. Damn, that jury duty. This would have been a better opening.
Luckily, it's buried. It's buried in paragraph 15 of our podcast.
Yeah.
Nobody will get to this point.
But the Nigeria thing, by the way, is that their women's soccer team upset Australia in the World Cup, which apparently is a big deal. But as far as the coup thing, it's the same reason that Barack Obama and Secretary of State John Kerry never acknowledged that the Egyptian coup was a coup, which was just as coup-ish as it gets, as is this thing. When a bunch of guys from the army come in and point a gun at the elected president and say, come with us, you're being replaced by a general, that's a coup. And it happened in Egypt, happened here. But there is a law that Congress passed at some point that says if there's a coup, then we have to withhold certain kinds of support, I think military support, whatever. And that has led, apparently it's going to lead to a series of presidents denying the coups are coups. Because we
have a base there. We can't afford to deny the military.
Right, but this leads to
Niger.
That was the next part. That was the next part of my quiz. What does the Niger coup have to do with events in St. Petersburg, Russia this week?
Well, the Russians are supposedly behind it in some fashion.
Not the answer I was looking for.
The guy who was couped out was supposedly pro-Western, and the generals who replaced him have some weird tie to Russia. I don't know what. I don't know why we should care, but
the connection. There is a concern on our part that now they are going to move in Russia's favor. And by the way, if they do that, then I'm sure we'll be more than willing to call it a coup. But so long as there's any hope of steering the new government in our direction and letting us keep our drone bases there and our 1,000 troops there and the French troops there and everything else, we're going to not call it a coup, I'm sure.
What are our troops doing there? Are they fighting the Islamist insurgencies that all grew up in the wake of our failed Libyan, not failed, well, it was failed, in the wake of Gaddafi, our stupid,
they are
our stupid action against Gaddafi that released tons of arms into the belt just south of Libya and fueled every Islamic group, so that all those countries got put into turmoil in addition to Libya?
In a word, yes. That's one thing they say they're doing is fighting these Islamists, but those two drone bases also have a wider area of coverage. I mean, we're not like famous, I guess, for respecting the airspace of African countries. So they kind of, I think, go where they want. They go well beyond Niger and keep an eye on, yeah.
Do they go to Ukraine is the basic thing?
Well, no, they don't go that far. But to get back to St. Petersburg, what happened there is that Prigozhin popped up in Russia after supposedly finally being confined to Belarus for a little while for a photo op. Back in St. Petersburg, the big event was an assemblage of African leaders. There were leaders of, I think, 17 African nations. And of course, we see Niger as this struggle with Russia for influence in Africa. And I just want to say, this is so eerily reminiscent of the Cold War. In both cases, we say that the struggle is about freedom. In both cases, it's a lie. And one way you can tell is that we're more than willing to prop up an authoritarian government, as we will be willing to do in Niger if the authoritarian government is willing to be propped up.
But this guy who was deposed was he an authoritarian? I mean, they're all a bit.
No, he was democratically elected. My point is, we will, if the new government says we'll let you keep your bases and we'll resist Russia along with you, we will be more than willing to prop them up.
Well, I would too.
Well, would you? I mean, look, you know, in the case of the Cold War, I would encourage everyone to read Stephen Kinzer's book, The Brothers, about Allen and John Foster Dulles. You know, one was head of the CIA in the 50s, one was Secretary of State, and their global struggle with the Russians. I mean, what a fucking waste of lives. And in this case, it's kind of worse. Let me just make one point. Like, I think in general, so much of this chess game with the Soviets was pointless, because in the long run, the question is like, whose economy is going to collapse? And in the long run, the inevitable answer was theirs, you know, and that's what happened. But and in fact, as somebody argued in the New Republic, when I was acting editor, as John Mueller, we would have actually, he said, let him acquire assets, because they're operating at a loss in every country they support, and they can't, you know, partly because they're propping up an inefficient economic system. And in any event, if anything, their many global properties hastened their demise by costing them money. But let me just say, there's one additional flourish here that wasn't so true, the Cold War. Okay, so we say there's this Islamist threat, and we say it's a threat to American national security. Well, is it really? And if so, why? I would say one reason, if it is at all, is because we are on the side of the government that's killing them. That makes us the enemy. There's an argument for saying to Russia, be my guest, define yourself as the enemy of Islamists all across Africa. And maybe that's not a decisive consideration, but it is a downside to propping up these governments.
You're saying the Russians destroy the economies of the governments they're involved in? Or
well, I'm saying most of these economies, in part because many of them were more or less communist, they tended not to be market economies.
Right.
So Russia tended to subsidize them. It subsidized Cuba. This drained Russia's financial resources. Ultimately, what ended the Cold War was the economic collapse of Russia. The system wasn't working.
I don't understand why. I don't buy that. I think the chess game is ridiculous. Who cares if Russia controls Niger? They're welcome to it. Who cares if they fight our anti-Islamic battles for us? That's great. Let them do that.
Well, again,
who cares?
It isn't
who cares if they're involved in Syria? I don't think Israel does, but that's Israel's problem. And you know, the fact that they shot down one of our drones, and we're near to having a war with them in Syria, that's insane. We shouldn't be there.
No, it's just.
But I don't. But if we have a country that has a base of ours, as Niger does, and there's an authoritarian government that's going to protect it, we have to suck up to them a bit, assuming the base is worth having.
Well,
maybe it's not.
Two things. I mean, first of all, on Syria, like, I agree. And look, you will know that there is some hope for the future of American foreign policy if the following happens. which it never will, that there will be coverage of this, these dust-ups in Syria where a Russian pilot flies close to one of our drones and harasses a drone in Syrian airspace. And in a major U.S. periodical, they note that Russia is there with Syria's permission. We are not. Our drone is violating international law. Russia's plane is not. It's harassing our drone with the support of the Syrian government. It's Syrian airspace. We're violating international law. The day that the New York Times includes that information in a story is the day there's hope for foreign policy.
Well, I'm sure David Sanger includes that all the time, Bob.
All the time. All the time. We're joking.
It's
folks,
weird.
But
it's weird. This important article you published when you were editor of the New Republic doesn't seem to have been enough to get you a mention in Marty Parrott's index of his autobiography.
Are you in Marty's index?
I'll reveal that answer in the Parrot room.
Oh, I'll bet it's a yes. You're being humble.
No, it's not a yes.
That's sad.
Neither of us are in the index of Marty Parrot's book. It may just be a bad index.
Indexing error. I smell an indexing error.
May just be a bad index. One of our readers found a long paragraph of like a bunch of names that I think I mentioned it. I don't know about you, but I think I mentioned it. And there's one photo where you can see like this much of my forehead.
Huh.
So that's important.
I knew I should have mentioned Marty in my Buddhism book so that he'd reciprocate, but it just didn't happen.
So anyway,
look, quickly, I just want to emphasize on the, like you said, if the Russians will fight the Islamist force again, to the extent that we need to fight them, it may be just because we're there fighting them. In other words, if Russia steps in and fights them, they won't be fighting them for us anymore because the Islamists won't be pissed off at us anymore. Russia will then be the enemy.
Right. I got that point.
Okay. But, again, if you ever see that in the New York Times, text me. That'll make my day.
That's better than a mention in Marty Parrot's index. I don't know.
I would have loved. I would have been deeply, secretly gratified if Marty had, thought to mention my 7-month tenure.
You were editor of the fucking magazine. Of course, you should be in his index. But anyway, editor. I actually admire the fact that he wrote the autobiography he wanted to write and defied all conventional rules of what it should include. But
what are those? That it should include you and me?
Well, that that it's comprehensive, that it like goes through his life.
No, I
chapter
think,
by chapter.
No, I think there are probably two things. There's him settling scores. I don't think Marty's actually a huge name dropper, so maybe we shouldn't be so offended. Maybe it wasn't a judgment that our names aren't worth dropping.
I have looked at the photos, Bob. And I'm not sure you'll want to stick with that comment. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, so
there's
anyway,
there's one of him with Warren Beatty.
Huh. Anyway, settling scores, dropping names. Apparently, you and I didn't rate the name dropping. I was closer to you, probably.
He's not a big name dropper, I should say, but
he's not a huge one.
The photos are name dropping. But go ahead.
So
photos might be.
Well, I was probably closer to you than getting in on grounds of score settling. He was not happy with my views on Israel, which is something we should talk about in the Parrot room. The alarm just went off.
Okay, well, we're going to just keep going here.
Yeah, we're doing this. To the Parrot room. We're doing this new thing where we're just going to keep taping and say, okay, we're going to the. We used to, and we may return to this. I don't know, but this thing we're doing partly because of the jury duty, we may stick with. Which is tape a continuous thing, signal when we're going to the Parrot room. It doesn't make that much difference to the actual end user.
Yeah.
The point is, you see the public version on YouTube and the regular podcast feed, and yeah.
Well, what do I have to do now? You have to.
Nothing. What we're about to. I mean, we can talk about what we're going to talk about in the Parrot room.
I don't have to shut down the QuickTime. I don't have to do that.
No, quite the opposite. Oh, we're just going to keep going.
Oh, okay.
But,
it's like a Wayne
first,
Newton
First, we're still in the public part. So, are the things you're going to? So it's patreon.com/Parrot room. I do want to say a thing or two about Israel. I want to extend my remarks about Tony Bennett, I found that his recovery from his brush with serious drug abuse was a much more dramatic story than I knew last week when I quoted the line that he said saved him, which is, "You're sinning against your talent." It's actually much more dramatic, although it does involve that line. Then Randy Meisner of the Eagles died. You heard that, right?
Well, Sinead O'Connor died.
Sinead O'Connor died. So that's three musicians.
There's I'm just reading in order here, not necessarily in order of importance. We're in the sort of Queen for a Day segment of the Republican nomination. So Vivek Ramaswamy is surging. Why is he surging? I don't know. We can talk about that.
Yeah. It was his all-in appearance.
And there is a David Sachs. I didn't realize he was in on all in.
Yeah.
Because there's a David Sachs theory that I'm nurturing with not much evidence, but a little evidence. There's a whole lab leak controversy because they discovered a Slack channel where the scientists who wrote an article pissing on the lab leak theory confessed some doubts as to whether it wasn't true or not. And Nate Silver is all over the case, bashing them right and left. There's an important question about the border and the numbers and the surge that people like me projected. I mean, the numbers are as bad as they ever were. They're, despite what Biden says, he's just letting in people allegedly legally, but not really. So he's letting the same number of people, but people like me predicted that if he keeps letting him in, there'll be an even bigger surge.
Okay, don't leave it in the locker room.
Okay, and why hasn't that happened? There's the end of DEI and ESG. I have a crazy theory about Twitter.
X.
And
Mickey.
FX. Yeah, right. Well,
no, I think we should insist that no one ever call it X. I'm sticking with Twitter till the day I die. I'm going to call it Twitter.
There we go. There's
plenty. Remember, this is a slightly abbreviated edition, although I don't want to stop you. What else?
No, they're
and I may get back to you.
The four companies in AI have formed a sort of council to regulate themselves, not including some other people. And I want to get your opinion on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Happy to respond.
Don't leave it in the locker room.
Don't leave it in the locker room. Okay. So patreon.com/parrot room. We encourage people to smash the like button. And what else? So
don't spend all your money on prostitutes and sex clubs. Give some to us.
Now, Mickey. You mean give the money to us, right?
Right.
Don't give the prostitutes and sex clubs. You meant
but the money. Love. We'll take the love.
No, the money. We would make better use of the money than that. That's what we should. Yeah, Hunter should have just subscribed to the Parrot Room instead of spending his money on.
He would have gotten a get out of jail free card from me.
Yep. Yeah, I want to. Speaking of which, just maybe revisit the Epstein plea deal and see if there are interesting parallels to that case. But okay, so thanks, folks.